I caught my fiancé in bed with my best friend. What are you gonna do? Cry? He mocked. I just smiled and left. This morning, my phone was full of missed calls from both of them. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I still can't believe I'm saying this out loud. My hands are shaking as I think about it, but not from sadness anymore. No, this is pure, ice-cold rage. It all started a few weeks ago, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing since. My life, the one I had so carefully built, the one that looked so perfect from the outside, was a beautiful, complete lie. Let me give you some background so you understand. My name is Audrey, I'm 34. And until that night, I was engaged to Garrett. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, and I thought my life was perfectly mapped out. He was handsome, charming, the kind of man my mother absolutely adored. We were that couple, the ones whose pictures on social media probably made everyone else a little bit sick with envy. Our wedding was just 4 months away, a beautiful autumn ceremony at a vineyard we'd been planning for what felt like forever. And then there was Paige. My best friend. My maid of honor. We'd known each other for 15 years, since we were awkward 16-year-olds trying to figure out who we were in the high school cafeteria. She was more than a friend, she was the sister I never had. We'd been through everything together, first heartbreaks, college graduations, even the funeral for my father a few years back. She held my hand through the entire service. I trusted her with my life. Was, being the key word in all of that. Looking back, of course, there were signs. Little red flags, tiny little things that made my stomach twist for a second before I pushed the feeling down, telling myself not to be ridiculous. You know how it is. You don't want to see what's right in front of you. You tell yourself you're being crazy, insecure. It's just so much easier to believe the lie. It started subtly, about 4 months ago. Garrett suddenly got this huge health kick. He decided he needed to get in perfect shape for the wedding, which I supported, of course. And who did he hire as his personal trainer? Paige. She'd gotten her certification a couple of years back and was trying to build her client list. At the time, it seemed perfect. My 2 favorite people, working together toward a common goal. I was so proud of them both. What an absolute fool I was. Soon, he started coming home later from his office. Client meetings running long, he'd say, kissing me on the forehead as he dropped his briefcase by the door. Then it was late nights at the gym with Paige. She's really pushing me, babe. I'm gonna look amazing in that tux, he'd grin, flexing his bicep in the mirror, and I'd smile back, telling him how handsome he already was. I didn't question it. Why would I? His phone was always face down on the counter. Always. If we were watching a movie and he got up to get a drink, he'd flip it over. He'd get texts late at night, and I'd see him smile, that little secret smile at the screen from the corner of my eye. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he'd lock it so fast you'd think it was a reflex. Classic, right? A total cliché. But when I'd ask, just gently, who are you texting so late, he'd flip it around on me. The gaslighting was an art form, really. Why are you so controlling, Audrey? Don't you trust me? God, you're getting so insecure lately. Is it the wedding stress? And like an idiot, I'd apologize. I would apologize for feeling suspicious, for my gut telling me something was deeply wrong. I remember one night, about a month before it all blew up. The 3 of us were having dinner at our favorite Italian place. We were laughing, drinking wine, talking about the final details for the wedding. Garrett put his arm around me and said to Paige, I'm the luckiest man in the world. I'm marrying the most amazing woman, and I've got the best friend anyone could ask for. He looked at me when he said the first part, but then his eyes slid over to Paige when he said the second. They held the gaze for just a second too long. My stomach did that familiar twist. A cold dread washed over me for a heartbeat. But I just took another sip of wine and told myself it was nothing. It was just the wine making me silly. The week it happened, I was supposed to be out of town for a 2-day work conference. It was a boring, corporate event in a stuffy hotel 2 states away. I hated these things, but it was important for a potential promotion I was up for, a significant step up that came with a much higher salary. Garrett had been so supportive, helping me pack my suitcase and telling me to go knock him dead. Paige had even sent me a text that morning, "Good luck. You're gonna kill it. Wish I could be there to cheer you on." The memory of that text, knowing what she was really cheering for, makes me physically ill now. The conference was a drag, just as I expected. Endless PowerPoint presentations and lukewarm coffee in paper cups. I spent the first day counting the hours until I could go back to my quiet hotel room, order an overpriced club sandwich from room service, and call Garrett. We talked that night, a perfectly normal conversation. He said he was just at home, watching a game on TV, missing me like crazy. He sounded tired. I know. He must have been exhausted. But things have a funny way of working out, don't they? The main keynote speaker for the second day had a family emergency and had to cancel at the last minute. The whole conference schedule got moved up, and suddenly, everything was over by noon on the second day instead of wrapping up in the evening. My boss, a decent guy named Mr. Henderson, told us all to just head home early. "Enjoy the extra day off, folks," he said with a wave. I was ecstatic. A whole extra day and a half with Garrett before the weekend. I felt like I'd won the lottery. The drive was about 4 hours, and I spent the whole time buzzing with excitement. I pictured the look on his face when I walked through the door. I put on our favorite playlist, a cheesy mix of 80s rock we'd made together, and sang along at the top of my lungs. The world felt bright and full of possibility. I decided to make it a real surprise. I wouldn't even text him that I was on my way. I imagined us having a romantic, spontaneous evening together. About 30 minutes from home, I pulled off the highway and went to that nice little market we both love, the one with the imported cheeses and fancy crackers. I bought a bottle of his favorite Cabernet, some prosciutto, a wedge of brie, all the things for a perfect, cozy night in. As I was checking out, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "Sleep well, my love. Miss you like crazy." I smiled, my heart feeling so full it could burst. I typed back, "Miss you more. Can't wait to be home." I felt a little pang of guilt for the white lie, telling him I'd be home tomorrow, but I knew it would be worth it for the surprise. I pulled onto our quiet, tree-lined street just after 10 p.m. It was dark, peaceful. The lights in our house were on, which was good. He was home. I felt that little flutter of happiness, that comfortable feeling of coming home to the person you love. I parked in the driveway, gathered the grocery bag in my suitcase, and walked to the front door, fumbling for my keys in my purse, my mind already on that bottle of wine. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't in our driveway. It was parked 2 houses down, under the deep shade of an old oak tree, almost completely hidden from view. But there was no mistaking it. A cherry red Mustang. Paige's car. My first thought wasn't suspicion. It was confusion. What is she doing here so late? My brain, bless its naive little heart, started scrambling for logical explanations. Maybe she and her husband, Wesley, had a fight, and she came over to talk to Garrett. Maybe her car broke down and Garrett went to pick her up. Anything, absolutely anything, but the truth that was screaming at me from the shadows. I stood there for a long moment on my own front porch, the cool night air on my skin, the keys cold in my hand. The grocery bag suddenly felt like it was filled with rocks. I took a deep breath and told myself not to be ridiculous. I put the key in the lock and turned it as quietly as I could. I don't know why I was being so quiet. Maybe some primal instinct was telling me not to announce my arrival, not to interrupt whatever was happening inside. The house was silent. The downstairs was dark, except for the faint glow of the kitchen's under-cabinet lighting. I took off my heels, leaving them by the door, and set the groceries on the granite counter. "Garrett?" I called out softly. No answer. I frowned. His car was in the driveway. He had to be home. Then I heard it. A sound from upstairs. A low murmur, then a soft laugh. It was a woman's laugh. And I knew that laugh better than I knew my own. It was Paige's laugh. My blood went cold. It felt like all the warmth in my body just evaporated, replaced by a terrifying, icy dread. Every excuse my brain had manufactured just shattered into a million pieces. There is a moment when you hover between disbelief and the horrifying certainty of the truth. I was in that moment, standing in my dark kitchen, listening to the sound of my world ending, one laugh at a time. I started moving. I don't remember deciding to. It was like my body was on autopilot, being pulled by an invisible string. I left my suitcase, the wine, the cheese, and walked towards the stairs. My footsteps made no sound on the thick runner. My own heartbeat was a deafening drum in my ears. The closer I got to our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, the clearer the sounds became. His voice, her voice. Whispering. Another laugh. And then a sound that made my stomach clench so hard I thought I would be sick. The rhythmic creak of our bed. Our bed. The one we picked out together at Pottery Barn. The one where we talked about our future, our kids, our dreams. My hand was shaking as I reached for the doorknob. For a split second, I thought about turning around. Just walking out the door, getting in my car, and driving until I ran out of gas. Pretending I had never come home. But I couldn't. I had to see. I had to know for sure. I pushed the door open. And there they were. Tangled together in our white linen sheets. The room was dimly lit by the bedside lamp, casting long shadows on the walls that made them look like grotesque monsters. They didn't see me at first. It took them a second that stretched into a painful, suffocating eternity. Paige saw me first. Her eyes widened in genuine horror, her mouth opening in a silent "oh." She scrambled to pull the sheet up to her chin, a useless gesture of modesty. Garrett turned, and his face was a mask of pure shock, his mouth hanging open. I just stood there, framed in the doorway, unable to move, unable to breathe. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, choking me. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, a roaring sound like the ocean. Garrett finally found his voice, and the first words out of his mouth weren't an apology. They were an accusation. "Audrey, what are you? You're not supposed to be home until tomorrow." As if my early arrival was the real crime here. Paige started stammering, her voice trembling, tears already welling in her eyes. "Oh my God, Audrey. I'm so sorry, we can explain." But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at the man I was supposed to marry in 4 months. The man I loved with my whole being. And as I watched him, his shock melted away, replaced by something else. Something ugly and twisted. A defensive arrogance. A smirk started to play on his lips. He sat up, the sheet pulled around his waist, and he looked me right in the eye, a challenge in his gaze. And then he said the words that would echo in my head for weeks, the words that lit the match of my rage and burned down the last remnants of my love for him. "What are you gonna do?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Cry?" Something inside me snapped. The shock, the horror, the heartbreak, it all vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying calm. It was the kind of calm that comes before a hurricane. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the lamp at his head, though God knows I wanted to. I slowly reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The flash was startlingly bright in the dim room, making them both flinch. I took one picture. Then another. And another. They tried to cover themselves, shouting my name, but it was too late. I had my proof. Crystal clear. I lowered the phone and looked at them one last time, their faces now a mixture of panic and fury. "Thank you," I said, my voice even and steady, which surprised even me. "Thank you for making this so easy." Then I turned around and walked out of the room. I walked down the stairs, my back straight, my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Garrett yelling, his voice cracking with rage. "That's it? You're just going to walk away? Audrey! Get back here, you coward!" I stopped at the front door. I didn't turn around. I just spoke into the silence of the house. "No," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the foyer. "I'm just getting started." I slipped on my shoes, picked up my purse, and walked out the front door, leaving my suitcase, the expensive groceries, and the smoking ruins of my life behind me. I didn't look back. I drove. I don't even remember the first 10 minutes of it, my mind was a complete, merciful blank. Then the shaking started, my whole body trembling uncontrollably, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. But still, no tears. Just this, hollow, vibrating rage that settled deep in my bones. I ended up at one of those generic, roadside motels you see off the highway. The kind with a flickering neon vacancy sign and carpets that have seen better decades. I paid for a room in cash, locked the deadbolt and the chain behind me, and sat on the edge of the stiff, scratchy bedspread. The room smelled like stale cigarette smoke and bleach. I stared at the popcorn ceiling, watching the headlights of passing cars dance across it in a hypnotic, silent rhythm. The phone, which I'd placed on the nightstand, remained silent for the first few hours. They were probably still in shock, scrambling to figure out their next move, trying to spin a story where they weren't the villains. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark, the images from the bedroom playing on a relentless loop in my head. Garrett's smirk. Paige's panicked eyes. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it felt less like a heartbreak and more like a death. The person I was just a few hours ago, the happy, trusting, in love Audrey, she was gone. A different person was sitting in that motel room. A colder, harder person. And she was making a plan. The first buzz from my phone came around 3 a.m. I ignored it. Then another. And another. By the time the weak morning sun started to filter through the cheap, thin curtains, my phone was having a full-blown seizure on the nightstand. I finally picked it up. 47 missed calls from Garrett. 23 from Paige. And the texts, the texts were a masterpiece of pathetic, self-serving desperation. "Paige, Audrey, please call me. We need to talk. It was a horrible mistake. I love you. Don't throw away our friendship. Garrett, babe, where are you? Are you okay? Please don't do anything crazy. I can explain everything. It wasn't what it looked like. Paige, please don't tell Wesley. I'm begging you, Audrey. You'll ruin my life. He can't know. Garrett, this is my fault, not hers. Yell at me, scream at me, just please come home so we can talk this out like adults." And my personal favorite, a text from Garrett around 7 a.m., when his panic was clearly turning to anger, "You better not ruin my life over this. I swear to God, you'll regret it." Ruin his life? The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat there, scrolling, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. They thought I was going to break down, have a hysterical fit, make a scene. They underestimated me. They mistook my kindness for weakness. But here's the thing they didn't know. This wasn't the first time my gut had screamed at me. And while I had been pushing my suspicions down, a small, rational part of my brain had started quietly preparing for the worst. About a month ago, I had been trying to find a tax document on our shared iPad and I stumbled across something. Garrett was still logged into his Messenger account. He was usually so careful, but he'd slipped up. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Messages between him and Paige. Not just a few. Months and months of them. They'd been meeting up at the gym for their personal training sessions, which were anything but. They talked about my work schedule, my business trips, the times I'd be out of the house visiting my mother. They were planning their sordid hookups around my life. The best part? He'd been paying Paige for these sessions using our joint credit card. My money. Paying my best friend to sleep with my fiancé. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it all. I had taken screenshots of everything that day, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the iPad steady. I saved them all to a secure, password-protected folder in the cloud, telling myself I was being crazy, that I'd probably delete them in a week and laugh at my own paranoia. But I never did. And now, sitting in that dingy motel room, I was so incredibly grateful for that moment of foresight. I had receipts. Literal, actual receipts. So, while they were blowing up my phone with their pathetic pleas and empty threats, I was already in motion. My first call wasn't to a friend or my sister. It was to my bank. I got a wonderfully helpful woman named Brenda on the line. I calmly explained that I needed to separate my joint accounts immediately due to, let's call it, irreconcilable differences. I moved my half of our savings, money I had earned from my salary and a small inheritance from my grandmother, into a new, private account. I had her freeze the joint credit card and remove Garrett as an authorized user on my personal cards. Brenda must have heard this story 1,000 times. There was no judgment in her voice, only efficient sympathy. You got it, honey, she said in a warm, motherly tone. We'll take care of everything on our end. You just take care of yourself. Next, I sent a single, mass email. It went to the wedding venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist. The subject line was simple: wedding cancellation, Audrey and Garrett. The body was just as brief. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding scheduled for October 12th is cancelled. Please consider this email as formal notification. I knew I'd lose some deposits, but it was a small price to pay for freedom. I spent the rest of the morning methodically untangling our lives. I changed the passwords on every single one of my accounts, streaming services, online shopping, even the electric bill. It was a tedious, strangely cleansing process. With every new password I created, I felt a little bit of my old life sloughing off, making way for whatever came next. They were still trying to reach me, of course. The calls had turned into voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. I listened to one from Garrett, just out of morbid curiosity. He was crying. Actual, sobbing tears. Audrey, I love you, he choked out. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I was weak. Please, please just talk to me. It was a great performance. Too bad I had months of messages that proved his love was a convenient lie. I deleted the voicemail and blocked both their numbers. Silence. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, my phone was quiet. The silence was beautiful. It was the sound of me taking back control. The rage was still there, a low, steady burn in my chest. But now, it had a purpose. It was fuel. They thought I would crumble. They had no idea I was just laying the foundation for their destruction. I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. Around noon, there was a sharp knock on my motel room door. I froze. I ignored it. Then the knocking got louder, more insistent. Audrey! I know you're in there. I saw your car. Open the door. It was Garrett. His voice was muffled through the cheap wood, but the arrogance was still there. I walked over to the peephole. He was standing there, his hair a mess, his face pale and strained. Paige was hovering behind him, her face red and swollen from crying. She wouldn't meet my eye, even through the peephole. They looked pathetic. I felt nothing. No pity, no lingering affection. Just a cold, hard emptiness where my heart used to be. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching them through the distorted lens. He knocked again, harder this time, making the door rattle in its frame. Audrey, for God's sake. Don't be so childish. We need to talk about this. Childish? He had the nerve to call me childish? The man who was screwing my best friend in our bed just hours ago? I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I just stayed silent, my back pressed against the wall, waiting for them to give up. After another 5 minutes of knocking and calling my name, they finally did. I watched them walk away, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Garrett kicked the tire of his expensive car before getting in. Good. Let them feel a fraction of the frustration I was feeling. That's when I knew I couldn't stay there. They knew where I was. I needed a safe place, a real sanctuary. I packed my small overnight bag and checked out of the motel, not even bothering to get a refund for the second night. There was only one person I could trust completely, one person who would have my back no matter what. My older sister, Brooke. Brooke lived about an hour away in a neighboring city. She was a no-nonsense divorce lawyer, ironically enough. She was tough, pragmatic, and had a BS detector that was second to none. She'd never been a huge fan of Garrett, always saying he was too smooth for his own good. Turns out, a lawyer's intuition is usually spot on. I called her from the car as I got on the freeway. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can I come stay with you for a bit? A few days, maybe? Of course, she said immediately, no questions asked. That was Brooke. Solid. Dependable. Then, after a pause, she added, her voice softening, is everything okay? You sound weird. And that's when the dam broke. The tears I hadn't shed, the screams I hadn't screamed, they all came out in one gut-wrenching, ugly sob. I had to pull over to the side of the road, onto the gravel shoulder, because I couldn't see through the flood of tears. I told her everything. The whole sordid, ugly story. The gym, the late nights, the text messages, walking in on them, Garrett's sneer. Everything. She listened patiently, the only sound on her end being her quiet, steady breathing. She didn't interrupt, she just let me pour it all out. When I finally finished, hiccuping and gasping for air, there was a long silence on the line. Then she said, her voice dangerously calm and laced with steel, that son of a bitch. Okay. You drive here. Drive carefully. When you get here, we're going to have a glass of wine, and then we are going to burn their worlds to the ground. Arriving at Brooke's house felt like reaching a sanctuary. She opened the door before I was even out of the car, wrapping me in a fierce hug that felt like it could hold my broken pieces together. I must have looked a wreck. I felt like one. She steered me inside, sat me down on her comfortable couch, and handed me a glass of water, which I drank gratefully. Her home was calm and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos in my head and my life. We sat up late that night, a bottle of expensive red wine between us. For the first time, I showed someone the screenshots I had saved. As Brooke scrolled through them on my phone, her expression hardened. As a divorce lawyer, she'd seen her fair share of infidelity, but this was her little sister. This was personal. The sheer arrogance, she muttered, shaking her head. They documented their own downfall, Audrey. From a legal standpoint, these are gold. The next day, just as I predicted, Garrett and Paige tried a new tactic. They started trying to get to me through other people. My phone, which I'd unblocked just to see what would happen, started lighting up with texts from mutual friends. Hey, Garrett's really worried about you. He says there was a huge misunderstanding. Paige is a complete mess. She says she made a terrible mistake and just wants a chance to apologize. They were trying to control the narrative, painting me as the unstable, emotional woman who had run off after a simple misunderstanding. That's when I decided it was time to deploy my first real weapon. Paige had a husband. Wesley. A quiet, kind man who worked as an architect. He adored Paige. He thought the sun shone out of her. He had just helped her finance the expansion of her home gym. And he deserved to know who he was married to. The thought of telling him made me sick to my stomach. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of this innocent man's life. I wrestled with it for hours, pacing back and forth in Brooke's guest room. Brooke was firm. "He has a right to know, Audrey," she said, sitting me down. "He's living a lie. The kindest, most respectful thing you can do for him is to tell him the truth. Let him make his own decisions based on facts, not fiction." She was right. So, with a deep breath and a heavy heart, I found his number in my contacts and sent him a simple text. "Wesley, this is Audrey. I know this is out of the blue, but there's something urgent we need to talk about in person. It's about Paige and Garrett." He responded almost immediately. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow morning?" We agreed to meet at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between Brooke's house and his office. I spent the rest of the night feeling anxious, rehearsing what I would say. There's no easy way to tell someone their entire life is a lie. I made physical copies of the most damning screenshots and put them in a plain manila envelope. I felt like a spy in some cheap movie, but as Brooke said, it was better to have physical proof that he could look at on his own time. The next morning, I saw him sitting at a small table in the back of the coffee shop. He looked worried, his brow furrowed. I walked over, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Wesley," I said softly. He stood up, a gentleman as always. "Audrey. What's going on? Is Paige okay?" His first thought was for her. It broke my heart a little. "Paige is fine," I said, my voice flat. "Please, sit down." We sat in an awkward silence for a moment after ordering our coffees. He was looking at me expectantly, his kind eyes filled with concern. I decided to just rip the Band-Aid off. There was no gentle way to do this. "Wesley," I began, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. "I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this. There's no easy way to say it. For the past few months, Paige and Garrett have been having an affair." His face went completely blank. It was like he didn't even process the words. He gave a small, nervous laugh. "What? No. That's not possible. You must be mistaken. They're just friends." "I wish I was," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. I pushed the manila envelope across the table. "I walked in on them 2 nights ago. In my bed. This is what I found on our shared iPad." "I'm sorry." He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. For a long moment, he didn't touch it. Then, with trembling hands, he opened it and pulled out the printed pages. I watched his face as he read. I saw the confusion slowly turn to dawning horror, and then to a deep, soul-crushing pain. He kept shaking his head, whispering no, no, no under his breath. He scrolled through timestamps, messages planning their meetups while he thought she was at yoga or out with friends. He saw the messages where they mocked him. He saw the pictures I took in the bedroom. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain so raw it was hard to look at. "All those nights she said she was working late," he whispered, his voice cracking. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We sat there in silence for a few more minutes. I just let him process, giving him the space he needed. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes now hard as stone. The pain was still there, but it was being forged into something else. Rage. Cold, hard rage. Thank you for telling me, Audrey, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I need to go. He stood up, leaving his untouched coffee on the table, clutching the envelope in his hand like it was a weapon. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, I was not the only one on a mission of revenge. I didn't hear from Wesley for the rest of the day, but I knew he was a man with a plan. Meanwhile, the campaign to paint me as the villain continued. I got a call from my mother, who was frantic. Audrey, honey, what's going on? Garrett called me. He was crying his eyes out. He said you had a big fight and just left. He's worried sick about you. I had to sit down. The absolute nerve of him, to call my mother and play the victim. Mom, I said, my voice tight with fury. He is lying to you. I am safe. I am with Brooke. I will explain everything later, but please, do not believe a single word that man says to you. He is not who you think he is. But the real show, the one that truly turned the tables, started the next morning. Paige was a fitness influencer, of sorts. Not famous, but she had a decent local following on Instagram. She did live workout sessions every morning at 10 a.m. from the expensive, state-of-the-art home gym that Wesley had so proudly built for her just last year. Brooke and I were sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee, when my phone buzzed with a notification. A friend had sent me a link. You need to see this. Now. It was a link to Paige's Instagram Live. She was on, all right. But it wasn't a workout session. The video was shaky, clearly filmed by Wesley on his phone. Paige was on the floor, sobbing hysterically, surrounded by expensive suitcases and boxes filled with her designer clothes. Wesley was standing over her, his voice cold and clear, devoid of any emotion. Tell them, he said. Tell your adoring followers the truth. And he made her. In front of over 200 live viewers, a weeping, broken Paige had to confess to having an affair with her best friend's fiancé for months. Wesley held up the printed screenshots to the camera, one by one, a narrator in his own personal horror film. This is who she really is, he said, his voice breaking just once. This is the inspirational person you've all been following. Then, for the grand finale, he picked up one of her prized, brightly colored kettlebells, walked over to a large, floor-to-ceiling mirror on the wall, and threw it straight through the center. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. The screen went black. The video was screen-recorded by dozens of people. Within an hour, it was all over our town's community Facebook group, shared with captions like "Local fitness influencer's affair exposed." It was brutal. It was humiliating. And a part of me, the part that had been so deeply hurt, felt a dark, satisfying thrill watching her perfect, curated world shatter just as mine had. Paige's career was over in the space of 10 minutes. Her Instagram was flooded with snake emojis and thousands of hateful comments before she finally deleted her account entirely. She had lost everything. Her husband, her beautiful home, her reputation, her source of income. All for Garrett. I wondered if she thought it was worth it. Of course, this just sent Garrett into a full-blown panic. Now the story was out, and he couldn't control it anymore. He tried to do damage control. That evening, he posted a long, rambling statement on his own Facebook page. It was a masterclass in non-apology. He talked about how people make mistakes when they are lost and how he had been going through a confusing and difficult time. He tried to paint himself as a tormented soul who had fallen for the temptations of another woman, and he even had the audacity to hint that our relationship had been strained for a while and that I was emotionally distant. He was trying to lay the groundwork for a narrative where this was somehow, some way, my fault. I read the post, sitting on Brooke's couch, and I just laughed. It was so pathetic it was almost comical. Confusing time? I said to Brooke, reading a line out loud. The only thing confusing is how he thought he'd get away with this. Brooke smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that I knew meant she was plotting. Oh, honey, she said. He thinks that sad little post is damage control? He has no idea what's coming. It's time to show them what a real, emotionally distant woman can do. She was right. His little pity party on social media was the last straw. He wanted to play games? Fine. I was ready to end it. I still had my trump card, the one I had been saving for the perfect moment. Remember our engagement party? It was a beautiful event at a local winery, filled with our friends and family. Everyone gave speeches. And Garrett, my handsome, charming Garrett, had given the most beautiful, heartfelt speech of all. He had stood up, champagne flute in hand, his eyes misty, and talked about how I had saved him, how I was the most loyal, trustworthy woman he had ever known. He'd looked me right in the eye and said, "Audrey, you are my rock, my conscience, my everything. I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of your love." Everyone had cried. My own sister had recorded the whole thing on her phone. I spent the next 2 hours in Brooke's home office. I downloaded the video of his speech. Then, I meticulously went through the months of screenshots from the iPad. I found the messages he had sent to Paige on the very day of our engagement party. Messages planning to meet her the next day while I was at my bridal shower. Messages where they made fun of the expensive gift my parents had given us. I opened up a simple video editing program on Brooke's computer. I took clips of his heartfelt, tear-jerking speech and intercut them with damning screenshots of his vile, cheating messages. The contrast was sickeningly effective. Clip of Garrett, smiling tearfully, "Audrey, you are the most loyal, trustworthy woman I have ever known." Cut to a screenshot of his message to Paige, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Audrey will be gone all day. Wear that little black workout top I like." Clip of Garrett, raising his glass, "I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of your love." Cut to a screenshot of his message to Paige, sent an hour before the party, "Dinner with her parents tonight. Kill me now. LOL. At least they paid for the good wine." I set the whole thing to a sad, mournful piano track. It was a 3-minute masterpiece of emotional destruction. When I was done, I uploaded it to YouTube, set it to unlisted, and then simply posted the link in the comments section of his self-pitying Facebook post. I didn't add a single word. I just dropped the bomb and walked away from the computer. It took less than 5 minutes for the first comment to appear under my link. Oh my God. Then another. And another. His post, which had been getting a few sympathetic comments from his clueless friends, was suddenly a war zone. People were horrified. Friends who had been at our engagement party, who had witnessed that speech firsthand, were now seeing the rotten truth behind it. The video was shared. And shared again. It went nuclear. By the next morning, he had deleted his entire Facebook profile. But it was too late. The video was everywhere. He called me that afternoon, from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but my curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said. It was him. And he was crying. Not the fake, manipulative sobs from the voicemail. This was the sound of a man who was utterly, completely broken. "Please," he begged, his voice thick and choked with tears. "Please, Audrey, take it down. My boss saw it. My family, my parents won't even speak to me. You've destroyed me." I held the phone to my ear, listening to his pathetic whining. I thought about the pain he had caused me. I thought about the humiliation. I thought about his smug, arrogant smirk in our bedroom. I felt a wave of pure, cold satisfaction wash over me. I let him cry for another few seconds, savoring the sound. Then, I took a deep breath. "What are you gonna do?" I asked, my voice calm and quiet. "Cry?" Then I hung up. The moment I disconnected the call, a profound silence filled the room. It was the kind of quiet that follows a massive explosion. It was over. The war was won. Garrett and Paige had built their own funeral pyre, and I had simply provided the match. If you have listened this far, please do me a favor and hit that like button, and then comment the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know that you're here with me, walking through this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can imagine. Please, comment with a 1, and let me tell you the rest of my story. The aftermath was quiet. For me, at least. For them, it was a hurricane of consequences. The video didn't just go viral among our friends, it somehow made its way to the corporate headquarters of Garrett's financial firm. He worked in a field where reputation and trust are everything. His boss, a conservative, family values kind of man, called him in for a meeting the day after the video went public. I heard through the grapevine, our town was small, after all, that Garrett was placed on indefinite leave, pending a review. Everyone knew what that meant. His career, the one he was so proud of, was circling the drain. His impressive salary was about to become a thing of the past. Paige, after her public humiliation, had gone completely dark. She'd fled to her parents' house in another state to escape the fallout. Wesley had immediately filed for divorce, and with the mountain of evidence I had provided him, Brooke told me his lawyer was going to have a field day. There would be no amicable split. Wesley was going for blood, demanding the house and a significant portion of their assets, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. My own life, in contrast, became a whirlwind of practical, forward-moving tasks. With Brooke's expert legal guidance, I began the official process of disentangling myself from Garrett. We had owned our home together, and untangling that asset was going to be messy. I hired movers and began the arduous process of packing up 3 years of my life into cardboard boxes. It was a strange, bittersweet, and ultimately cleansing experience. One moment I'd be picking up a photograph of us smiling on vacation in Mexico, the memory making my chest ache, only to toss it into the trash bag a second later. The next, I'd be folding a sweater I had bought for him for Christmas, only to put it in a box labeled donate. Each item was a memory, and I was methodically purging them from my life. Our mutual friends, predictably, chose sides. The vast majority of them, after seeing the undeniable proof in the video, sided with me. My phone was flooded with texts and calls, all expressing shock, horror, and unwavering support. A few tried to play devil's advocate, a role I no longer had patience for. One friend, Sarah, called me, her voice hesitant. "Are you sure you want to throw it all away, Audrey?" she asked. "People make mistakes. Maybe you guys could go to therapy." "This wasn't a mistake, Sarah," I told her, my voice firm and clear. "It was a calculated deception that went on for months. And I'm not interested in being married to a man who conspired with my best friend to betray me. We're done." The conversation ended quickly after that. I was learning to set boundaries, to protect my own peace. The hardest part was telling my parents. They had loved Garrett. My dad had treated him like the son he never had. I drove to their house and sat them down in their cozy living room, the same room where Garrett had so formally asked for my hand in marriage just 6 months prior. I told them the truth. I didn't show them the video, it was too cruel, but I told them everything else. My mother cried, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. My father, a quiet, stoic man, just sat there, his face grim, his jaw tight. When I was done, he just stood up, wrapped me in a tight hug, and said, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We're here for you. Whatever you need." In that moment, I was so grateful for their unwavering love. It was the anchor I needed in the storm. A few weeks after the explosion, once I was settled into a new apartment across town, the dust began to settle. The constant calls and texts had stopped. The drama had faded into an ugly memory. The quiet was a relief, but it was also loud. The silence of my new apartment felt vast and empty. I had spent so many years building a life around another person, I had almost forgotten how to be alone. The first week, I tried to cook dinner and burned the pasta because I was just staring at the wall, lost in thought. I'd turn on the TV and not register a single thing that was happening on the screen. There were nights I'd just lay there, staring at the ceiling, not sad, not angry, just numb. Healing, I was learning, wasn't a straight line. It was messy and unpredictable. I threw myself into my work. The promotion I had been up for before all this happened came through, and I buried myself in the new responsibilities. It was a good distraction. But at night, the loneliness would creep in. I would cook dinner for one, watch TV alone on my new couch, and go to bed in a bed that felt far too big for just one person. About a month after I moved out, I was at a coffee shop near my new place, trying to work on a presentation, when I saw him. Garrett. I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost a significant amount of weight, his face was gaunt, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He looked haunted. He was standing in line, and he hadn't seen me. My first instinct was to grab my things and run out the back door. But then I stopped myself. Why should I run? I had done nothing wrong. So I stayed put, pretending to be engrossed in my laptop. But of course, he saw me. His eyes widened, and for a second, he looked like he was going to turn and leave. But he didn't. He got his coffee and then, to my dismay, he started walking towards my table. My heart started to pound, a familiar fight-or-flight response kicking in. I kept my eyes glued to my screen, refusing to acknowledge him. "Audrey," he said, his voice raspy and weak. I looked up slowly, my face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. "Garrett. Can I sit down for a minute?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair. "I'd rather you didn't," I said, my voice as cold as ice. He ignored me, pulling out the chair opposite me and sinking into it. He just stared at me for a long moment, as if he was seeing a ghost. "You look good," he finally said. "I'm busy," I replied, turning my attention pointedly back to my laptop. I wanted to say I'm sorry," he stammered, his eyes welling up with tears. "What I did, it was unforgivable. I know that. And what you did, well, I guess I deserved it." I stopped typing but didn't look up. "Is that all?" "No," he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I lost everything, Audrey. My job, my friends, my reputation. I'm broken. Paige and I, we're not together. We couldn't even look at each other after everything blew up. It was all for nothing." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, searching for some sign of pity, some flicker of the old Audrey who would have comforted him, who would have felt sorry for him. He found nothing. I finally closed my laptop with a soft click and met his gaze. "That sounds like a you problem, Garrett," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You made your bed. The fact that you don't want to lie in it anymore is not my concern. We have nothing more to talk about." I stood up, packed my things into my bag, and looked down at him one last time. He looked like a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine. "Goodbye, Garrett," I said. Then I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him sitting there alone amidst the ruins of the life he had so carelessly destroyed. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt free. Truly, completely free. Life began to find a new, quieter rhythm. The sharp edges of the betrayal started to soften, not because I was forgiving them, but because I was focusing on myself. It wasn't about forgetting, it was about accepting what happened and moving forward. I started doing things for myself, things I'd put on the back burner when I was with Garrett. I joined a hiking club and spent my weekends exploring the beautiful trails outside the city, breathing in the fresh air and feeling the solid ground beneath my feet. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my relationship. I started rediscovering who Audrey was when she wasn't part of a we. My sister, Brooke, was my rock through it all. We had weekly dinners, and she never let me wallow in self-pity. She celebrated my victories, big and small, from a successful presentation at work to simply making it through a weekend without feeling that pang of loneliness. She reminded me of my own strength when I forgot it. It was on one of those hiking trips, about 6 months after the breakup, that I met Sawyer. He was a landscape photographer, a kind, quiet man with warm eyes and a gentle smile that crinkled at the corners. We fell into step on the trail and started talking. The conversation was easy, natural. He was funny and smart, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a little spark of interest, a tiny flicker of hope. We went out for coffee the next week. I was nervous, my guard was up so high it was practically in orbit. I decided to just be honest. I told him, in a condensed, less dramatic version, that I had just gotten out of a very bad engagement. I figured it was better to scare him off early if he was going to be scared off at all. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he just said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. No one deserves to be treated like that." And that was it. No judgment, no invasive questions. Just simple, human compassion. We started seeing each other regularly. We took it slow, very slow. He was patient, understanding that I came with baggage and serious trust issues. He never pushed. He earned my trust, little by little, through his consistent, honest actions. He always left his phone face up on the table. He was open and honest about where he was and who he was with. They were small things, but to me, they were everything. He was everything Garrett pretended to be. One evening, a few months later, we were cooking dinner at my apartment. Music was playing softly on a speaker, and we were laughing about something silly I had done at work. He stopped chopping vegetables, turned to me, and said, "You know, I'm really glad that idiot broke your heart." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You are?" "Yeah," he said, his expression serious now, his warm eyes looking right into mine. "Because if he hadn't, I never would have met you." And in that moment, I knew I was healed. The scars were still there, a faint, silvery reminder of the battle I had fought and won. But they no longer hurt. They were just a part of my story, a chapter that was now closed. I still hear things now and then through the small-town grapevine. Garrett ended up moving to another state to try and start over, taking a much lower-paying job in a different field. I heard he's dating someone, but it's nothing serious. Paige is still living with her parents, her divorce finalized. She works as a receptionist at a dentist's office now. Their grand, passionate affair imploded, leaving nothing but wreckage and regret in its wake. I don't feel joy at their misfortune anymore. I just feel indifferent. Their lives are their own, and they have to live with the consequences of their choices. My life is mine. And for the first time in a long time, it is filled with peace, laughter, and a quiet, steady happiness. Sawyer and I are building something real, something based on honesty and respect. They thought I was weak because I walked away that night. They mistook my patience for weakness. They had no idea that sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one with the most detailed plan. They wanted to know what I was going to do. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just rebuilt my life into something better, stronger, and more beautiful than anything I could have ever had with them. And that, I've learned, is the best revenge of all. Thank you for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it with all of you. If you've ever been through something similar, or if this story resonated with you in any way, please leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories give me strength. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, please feel free to share it. Sometimes, just knowing you're not alone is all the strength you need to start over.